Hmm? Okay, so hello everyone. I'm very glad that you joined us. My name is Maria Cedric. I'm a leading methodologist of SkyTeach, and today we have a wonderful guest, Margarita Isanova. Hello.
Hello.
So Margarita's talk today will be about how to integrate social media into the lessons. I believe this topic would be interesting for every teacher who would like to keep up to date, as Margarita will talk about real English, new goals of learning English. And also this topic would be interested for everyone who wants to implement something new into the lessons, as Margarita will talk about new ways of using social media, social networks at the lesson, how to use it to work with vocabulary, writing, speaking, and so on. And just a few words about Margarita. Margarita has been working and is an English teacher for 8 years. She also has an experience of working as an interpreter and translator. I'd like to point out that she lived in the USA for 1 year as a flex program. Yeah, was it a great experience, Margarita?
Yeah, that was a really cool experience.
Wonderful. And also, 4 years ago, Margarita took a part in All Russian Olympiad and got a nomination авторский стиль в уроке.
Mhm.
Yep, that's great. And Margarita now works as a teacher and a methodologist at Language School Globus in Perm. So, Margarita, thanks for joining us. We really would like to listen to your talk.
Okay. First, I want to thank you, SkyTeach, because you give me such an opportunity to talk about my experience. And well, it all basically started long time ago when I was a student, a fifth grade student, and I worked at school as we all had practice, and probably when you work in a linguistic school, it was a gymnasium with lots of languages like English, German, and so on. And they had these books, Afanasio Mikheeva. If you work at school, you probably know these books. And I had sixth graders, and I had those texts in this book about Shakespeare, about British Parliament, about some really uninteresting things for sixth graders, and I tried to make it more interesting for the kids, more understandable. And I looked uh, for some ideas, and there was a lady at that time. She made profiles for Russian literature characters like Onegin and so on. It wasn't in she didn't use any kind of templates or something, but I thought that was a smart idea, and I came up with the idea of the profile for Shakespeare on Facebook. And it basically went well, and kids loved it. And I started to think about integrating social media into real lessons, into English lessons. And as for today, I came up with some kind of a plan or structure of how integrate these social media into real lessons, and I'm going to talk about it today. So, why do we need that? Um, First of all, I think that social media and internet created lots of new ways of communication. For example, we write comments, we post tweets, we write posts in our blogs, and we do lots of things that we um, didn't do like 10 years ago. We don't leave voice messages anymore. We just write in WhatsApp or something like that. And this creates some problems with this kind of communication because people struggle with the words. some vocabulary, some form of the sentences, and so on. So first of all, using social media helps us to teach people how to use the language in these kind of situations. Then also in this world we have something that's are changing. I'm going to talk about it more a bit later, but same things have different names. And if we talk about it with kids, they probably name the same thing, but differently. It's got different slang or something like that. And we need to talk with kids in the way they would understand us. Like, if we don't adjust to this, they won't listen to us. And there are basically two ways of using social media, as I think. Maybe you can find more. The first one is using social media and social networks just to rename things that we already know. For example, lots of people have Instagram, right? Like almost everybody. When you open Instagram and you look at the pictures, you can see some hashtags below the picture, and these hashtags are the keywords of this picture. And for example, when we start with some target vocabulary, or we need to refresh some vocabulary, or we need to think about some keywords to describe a picture, I say something like, well, imagine that you see this picture in the Instagram or in your newsfeed. Everybody has Instagram. And can you think of some hashtags that can go with this picture? And this simple thing really increases the probability of getting some real words, some real keywords for this picture, especially if we work with teenagers and young adults. Also, it's a good way to learn new vocabulary. Like we can have a picture with hashtags, and some of them are familiar, some of them are not. Some of these words can be new for the students, and we just try to understand them, try to work out their meanings from a picture. And this is actually if this is simple, these things we do almost every lesson. It's picture description and things like that. But when we put it in new words, I actually saw I actually saw kids getting interested in that, especially teenagers and young adults. After that, there are lots of other ways to put the form of social media into the lessons. For example, Twitter. When we need to summarize something, to get the idea of the text, or to summarize the text in one sentence, which can be really useful, even for some exams like PTE. There are some tasks like that. We also say something like, imagine that you have to retell the story, the main idea of the story, in a Twitter post. And it's like, it was 140 symbols, but now they increased it to 280 symbols, so it's easier now. And well, you can actually make their brain work in the way it used to work. They write tweets a lot, and they understand how to do that, and they start thinking about it in a way they actually do that every day, and it's easier than to try and think about and say something like think about the idea of the text and stuff like that. Also, if we can, we write blog posts instead of essays, because it's type of writing, and it has some kind of special structure, and if we don't have to pass any exams, we just use it as a writing, because it's more useful just for teenagers or for young adults, because they write blog posts more than essays in their real life. And as I mentioned it previously, if we need to summarize, to get some information from the text, or to talk about some key character from the book, or about some writers or famous people, we try and make up their Facebook profiles. It can be a wiki profile, but, well, I think Shakespeare wouldn't have a profile in wiki. And, it actually helps to summarize the information, to think about it, to make a creative pattern, a creative scheme, to maybe retell the text if you need to retell the text at school or somewhere else, or just to remember the information, because if you look at the profile, you probably remember the information better than if you just look at the text. And it also is more attractive to young students, because it's their world, it's something that they really like, and it helps to engage them in learning process, still learning some new words or new structures and everything. Well, another part of using social media, another way of using social media, is that we can use the tools of social media to keep students engaged and to track them. For example, when we start lessons, I usually work with young adults or with groups of students, of young students. I ask them to switch their smartphones into English, like all of the apps, all of the tools that they use. And this is a part of getting into real life English. And we analyze the structures that we can find on Facebook, or we can find on other social media, like Jane posted the picture 3 days ago, and so on. Instead of having the examples which are correct but not interesting, and which they don't see, which they don't remember after we talk about it. Then social media is a great way to subscribe subscribe to English content, like we have lots of publics, we have lots of groups, we have lots of Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts, for example, a new word every day and a new phrase every day. And this is really useful, because if we see that in our newsfeed, we remember it. Like, we remember funny jokes, we remember funny pictures, and it's always combined with some kind of things that help us to remember that. And this is a great way to increase vocabulary and to touch this real English and real communication that we actually need, because we learn English to communicate. Also, we can communicate with the real people in real life. I encourage my students to subscribe to groups or channels where they can talk to people who speak English, not native English speakers, like not maybe American or British people, but people who speak English as they do, maybe elementary, pre-intermediate level, so they can actually practice. And they after they do that, they realize that nobody is going to shame them for their mistakes, or nobody's going to tell them like, oh, you're making mistakes, something like that. And this encourages them to move forward, to learn more, to talk more, and also overcome the barrier, the communicative barrier that most of us have when we talk with people, when we use a foreign language. Well, I also use social media when I give homework and when I check homework. For example, some of my students have Twitter accounts where they post things like, you have to write 10 tweets in English until the next lesson with the target vocabulary or target structure or target grammar or something, whatever. It helps me to actually check it, and it's engaging because people like sharing stuff. People like sharing pictures, people like sharing Instagram stories where they speak English, where I can actually look at them and say, well, great, let's look at the greatest story from the last week. And kids and teenagers and even adults, they love it. And this is really useful, especially if they can't do some boring homework, because it's boring. Nobody does boring homework. And also, I talked about humor, and if just think about how many funny stories you know. Like, I think I know more than 100. They just appear in my head. Stories about kids at school and teachers and different characters, some jokes. We remember jokes because they're funny. They just stick in our mind. And if we make learning language funny using, for example, memes from the internet or jokes from the internet, especially with some kind of puns, because as I've experienced, understanding humor in foreign language, it's very important, and it's a sign of really knowing the language. And I think that it's a very important part for remembering things. So I try to use these memes and puns and everything from the internet, just to make people remember words, structures, maybe pronunciation, just everything, because it sticks. It sticks, and it sticks in the memory. It is funny, and people just love it. students are really, really excited when they see things that they are familiar with. Well, to summarize it, I know that we are really we're really, let us say, into the social media. Everybody uses it, and sometimes we think that it's evil. But if we can't conquer it, if we can't get rid of it, why don't we just go and use it as a tool? Because if it's so powerful that it can drag attention and engage all of the people around, why can't we use its tools to engage people and to drag their attention to English? Well, I'm open to questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
thank you
very
very
much.
much.
That was really interesting. Thanks. We have some questions from our teachers. First of all, they ask you to share the examples of your resources. Can you share what Instagram accounts you use for your lesson, Twitter account, and so on?
Well, I can recommend one Twitter account. It's just let me open it in my browser. It's a director of one New York school. His name is Eric Schoeninger, I suppose, something like that. I listened to him. I listened Eric Schoeninger. Where can I?
Yeah, we will write it in comments later.
Yeah. Okay. He is principal of a New York school, and I've heard his speech during the conference at Crunch conference last year in Moscow. He made a really powerful speech, and he uses Twitter a lot. And I get some ideas from him and from tweets that he retweets. And if I need some particular picture or particular Instagram account, I just Google it. Something like Instagram nature or Instagram kids or Instagram family or something like that. It's really easy. Just need to type some words in Google, and you can find whatever you want.
Okay, if we continue this topic, do you add your students to your Instagram, Wiki, and so on? Or do you prefer to keep it private?
I have some private accounts that I don't share, and some public accounts that I actually share. But mostly I just have a blank account with no pictures, maybe some pictures of motivational things about English and stuff, and with some official avatar or something like that, and I keep it open. And I keep some private material in private profile that nobody knows.
Very smart decision. Okay, and you also talked about some groups which students can join on Facebook to talk with native speakers. Do you create any groups like in WhatsApp or VK, Facebook for your students, like, like a learning community?
Yeah, I create some chats where we can chat in English. And I always talk to my students in English if I email them or text them, even if they are beginners. They have to struggle with that, and just maybe in some simple words, because this is real English. This is where real communication happens, and I think that these kind of chats, especially if we can chat with other speakers, with maybe people who don't understand Russian, this is very useful. And I encourage them to join the communities and groups on Facebook on different kind of foreign resources. and choose the groups according to their interests. Like if they like singing, maybe some groups of karaoke singers. If they like books, maybe some books communities or something. So they can talk about things they're interested in, and they can talk to people who understand them and their ideas, and they get some vocabulary that they would like to use maybe in their future life because they are interested in this topic, obviously. And this is also engaging, because if you read about something you're interested in, if you talk about people about some things that you're interested in, you learn it better. You just words just come to your mind, and this is really natural. It's about thinking, about reading, about talking about the things that you like. It's very important if you like the things you're talking about.
Okay, thank you very much. It was really interesting. And just one more question we have. Do you have any advice how we can motivate a student who is shy to speak or is not interested in learning language at all?
Well, it's a really difficult question because motivation is the problem. I think if a person is not motivated, maybe it's not the time he should learn English. I mean, maybe try again later in 2 years when something happens and he gets motivated. But, well, according to my experience, we can't just say, we can just in class we can just say like, well, Alex, sit somewhere else and just keep quiet while I'm trying to teach the rest of the class. We can't say that. And we have to engage students that come to our courses, for example, because their parents want them to come, or, well, we all know this kind of situation where we have to motivate unmotivated people. And I think that finding something interesting can be a good solution. Like kids sometimes don't like to talk about things that they're interested in because they think that you won't listen. They think that adults don't understand. And you need to maybe make some kind of personal contact, wait for a while, show interest and show understanding, be a kind of psychologist maybe a little bit, to let these ice melt and to let the person talk about it. For example, I had a guy, I had a student, he's a programmer, he's like 30 something, and he's very shy. And because he speaks with the computer. And he came to me because he needed some vocabulary, some structures to improve his understanding at work. And well, I didn't force him to speak. We just tried to get to know each other, to maybe, if he said a couple of sentences during the lesson, it was great. Then he started to talk more and more because he understood that I won't blame him for his mistakes. I won't say something like, you're wrong, it's not correct. And this is something personal that happens between a student and teacher, and it's more psychological, I suppose, than practical, because it's about attitude, it's about building relationships between the student and the teacher. If you have good relationships, well, a student can do something just to make you happy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I had the similar situation. I do agree with you. Okay, thank you very much, Margarita. That's probably all about the question. So thanks everyone for watching ours. It was really interesting, Margarita. Thanks again. Dear teachers, if you have any further question, you can always write them in the comments. We'll try to answer them. And we hope to see you at our live streaming next time again. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Goodbye.